Welcome to this episode of the Sneaker Principal Podcast. I have a letter from an assistant principal. It says here, Dear Sneaker Principal, I'm an assistant principal at a middle school, and recent events in Minnesota have really shaken up our school community. News of federal agents being involved in multiple shootings, including the recent death of a nurse and a legal observer, has sparked protests and a lot of fear and confusion. People are asking tough questions about justice, safety, and leadership. Some of our students have families in Minnesota and are scared. Others are overwhelmed by what they're seeing online. Teachers and parents are unsure how to talk about it without making things worse. As a leader, how do I help our school process this moment with care, truth, and stability? Sincerely, leading through uncertainty. I want to say this is a tough one, but also want to say this is an easy one. So let me go back to when I was a kid. So for those of you who don't know, I came to this country in the 80s, legally migrated here, then went through the process of seeking asylum, and then after years, eventually, my family gained a green card. So we gained the authorization to stay in the country legally. And in time, we all became U.S. citizens. But I do remember during that time always being scared. My mother would always tell us to be careful because if you do anything wrong, we could get deported. Growing up in Los Angeles, at least that's where I grew up here in America, in Los Angeles, there was always a fear of, no pun intended, but, the joke was always la migra, immigration. La migra in Spanish, I believe, is immigration. And a lot of my friends who were also in a very similar situation than I was in, coming from south of the border, that was a real fear. That was a real thing where, you have to be careful to not get caught up in immigration sweeps and things of that nature. So what's happening here is just been intensified, but it's not new. It's something that I was very familiar with as a kid who grew up in Los Angeles. But the thing that's different now is that then there was nobody fighting for immigrants. It was not a news point. It was not something that was even thought of. If anything, it was a joke, a pun, something people would kind of like, smirk at, at least in Los Angeles. I can't speak for other cities, New York City, Chicago, Atlanta, Minneapolis. I can speak for Los Angeles because as a kid, I remember very clearly that was something you were always, cautious about. But now, this has definitely intensified. It's in the news. It's nonstop in social media feeds, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and for a lot of our kids, who are watching this, who are getting the information from social media, it's right in your face. It's not one of those things where you would overhear your parents talking about, or you would, come across in the evening news it's playing on TV. It's come right into your phone. And both shootings of Alex Peretti and Renee Good were, for the most part, right there live on, not live, but it was recorded and posted. Of course, they blurred things out, but it was very clear what was happening. And the question is, for a lot of our kids are why, you know, especially if you're a child who, like me, understands the implications of ICE and immigration, and of which a lot of kids here in New York City are mostly silently terrified of. I think we can have conversations about what's going on. I think we can try to, bring calm and reassure and try to provide some kind of level of physical, emotional, spiritual safety. But I think that's the hard part, because you can't shift people's feelings when they are afraid, when they are angry, when they are uncertain. I think this is a time to really approach this from a very intellectual space. The one thing that we've lost our way with here in this country is civil education. Does that make sense? Social studies, history, understanding the laws. I remember being in high school and we went through the Constitution. It was very complicated. It was very dense language, but I remember Mr. Harrison, my AP US history teacher, making us really understand the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. And this is something that we don't really engage in anymore. Most adults don't understand what their rights are. We're not even talking about local laws. We're talking about just federal. First Amendment, Second Amendment, Third Amendment, Fourth, 13th, all they don't really understand, because again, we don't teach it anymore. It's not at the core of what having a real understanding of our civil responsibilities and the civil responsibilities of our government to us, and the rights that all human beings share, whether you're legal or illegal. And what does it mean to be legal or illegal at the same time? That's a whole other conversation. But I think approaching this from that standpoint, yes, you still have to provide the reassurance and the tools and the spaces to really calm people down, make them feel safe as much as possible. But I also think this is the time to really, let's go back to just the basics of civil engagement in our schools as early as possible, saying what are your rights, what are the privileges that you have, that are afforded you by the federal government, the law. I think we need to get back into that. I think once we understand that, we will move differently. We will ask for different things differently. I think even those law enforcement officers would have a better understanding of their responsibility to us as taxpayers. Even something as simple as human rights. And I think this is something that we've moved so far away from. Having those conversations about what are our human rights as well. How do we see each other? It breaks my heart when I see, families being separated. Because that was my biggest fear as a child. What if my father or my mother were picked up at work? What would happen to us? What would happen to my brother who was born here, or my sister who were born here, who were by birthright U.S. citizens? What would happen to me and my other sisters who weren't born here? These are things that were just constantly, especially as a child, where you rely on your parents to take care of you. And you do not want to be with strangers. You do not want to be in spaces that you're not familiar with. The fear is real. And then when you see the extreme actions of federal agents as has been televised, from Minnesota, from Arizona, from across the country, it's terrifying. But I think we need to make sure that we're engaging in our students and our community in ways that are healthy and making sure they have the resources that they need, whether it's legal aid, whether it's social emotional supports, therapy, counseling. Those things are important. But this is a very traumatic time. But also civic engagement has to be at the forefront. We need to start having conversations, not conversations that are tied into emotions, but conversations that are tied into what does the law say. Having a better understanding of the society that you live in. There's a lot of things that are happening that are fundamentally, against the core of what the Constitution says. But if we're just engaged in the emotional things, we're missing out on our intellectual ability to really, really, have dialogue and conversation and take actions that are better than just blowing whistles in people's faces and putting out cameras, which is still First Amendment rights, but at the same time, we need to start here. Because I believe if we start here and have understanding, then this follows. The problem is we're moving with this, and this is lost. My condolences to those who've lost family members in this chaos of time and space that we're in right now. But as a school leader, as educators, we have to start engaging in real dialogue and about civil engagement, understanding the laws, the Constitution, things of that nature. These need to start being talked about in our classrooms, because I think that's where the seeds of the ideas and pathways towards fixing this problem will come from. I hope this makes sense, and probably not, I don't know, but this is what I think and what I believe. All right, y'all. Uche and Joe, who's thinking principal. Till next time.